For this lab, I'd like to introduce you to Adobe Animate. So I want you to follow along with what I'm doing in the lab demo and create a simple Animate file and then save it and upload it to the Dropbox. It's really important that you download the graphics that you'll need for Lab 1. And you should have this planet Earth PNG that you download from Canvas. And let's look at the extra large icon. That's what it looks like. And what I want you to do is put it in a folder. Name that folder with your first name underscore last name underscore lab1 part1. Now you use this naming convention so that when I download the assignments from Canvas, then I'll know which folder belongs to which student. And so I recommend that you work through this demo with me before you actually do the reading. This week I want you to read Chapter 1 in the textbook, Getting Acquainted, in the Adobe Animate CC 2019 classroom in a book. So assuming that you've downloaded this file and you're ready to go, the next step is launching Animate, and you can find that in the Applications folder on your Mac or on the Start menu on your computer. It can be in a variety of places depending on whether you're using Windows 10 or Mac OS or some older version of Windows. When you launch Adobe Animate, this is what you're going to see. You'll see the starter screen. And there's a lot of stuff on the starter screen. I'm not going to go through everything that's there, but it's really changed a lot over the last, I guess, 8 months or so. Animate is moving more and more away from Flash and to make a HTML5 Canvas compliant tool. Although that when it first starts, it opens up to this tab where it has some presets for character animation, and the assumption is that the platform type is ActionScript 3. So here you can see the width and height of your composition or your movie, the frame rate, which by default is 30 frames per second, and then the platform type. Again, by default, it'll be ActionScript 3. But if we go to another tab here, we go to the Social tab, we see that we have some presets for content that we could create for Facebook. Again, ActionScript 3. Games. Notice how the games use Canvas and HTML5. Education, which they're still working on those presets, and they'll actually be catered more for creating things that teachers might use, like multiple choice test questions, etc. Ads, which are very nice, and here you have 19 presets, and these ads are pretty much set to meet standards for Twitter and Facebook ads, as well as Google to some degree. And then web delivery, which again is HTML5 Canvas, and most of the presets basically just set the movie to certain sizes, or they're configured to play on various mobile devices like the iPhone 5 through Android and the iPad. And of course, advanced allow you to specifically target emerging web technologies like HTML5, WebGL, VR, which is a newer one, which we'll take a look at, VR 360, and then Panoramic VR, which is actually a beta. Both of these are still in beta, and you can target an HTML, ActionScript movie as well. For the sake of practice and getting used to the UI, we're going to stick with HTML5 Canvas. I will once in a while pop back to ActionScript 3 so you can see what that's like, so you are familiar with it when you see it. Notice the frame rate difference between character animation and the web, and that's really for the assumption is you want smooth animation and you're using ActionScript 3. If we jump to, and we can of course select Canvas Air, by the way, is deprecated. It's, or should I say, be going away as a format for the web. It's sort of like Flash. Originally it was designed to build applications for the web. And now it's going away. If you want to look at some sample files and how they're structured, you can download them and take a look. They're actually the same files that accompany some of the Adobe tutorials, so you can see how they're structured. You can see that what Adobe really is focusing on is a lot using Animate for the web for character animation. That's kind of where they're going with it. For us, we'll use it sort of as a tool to get familiar with the principles of web animation to start, and then later we'll look more and more at technical aspects like looking directly at HTML and JavaScript. So let's create an animation using HTML5, and let's set our stage or our composition to 800 by 600, and then create. And when it opens, you should see this standard layout or something like this. This is a layout that I have actually created that I like for myself. What you will see when you turn it on is the Essentials layout. And so I want to go to it so that you'll be familiar with, and we'll see pretty much the same thing that I see. I have, you can create a custom layout for yourself, and I've done that because I want it to look more like the old Flash that I'm used to. So let's take a look at the environment here. When you open, and I will sometimes say Flash, and I mean Adobe Animate. When you look at Animate, it looks pretty much like most of the Adobe products that you're used to. We have a menu bar here. We have some tools on the left on this toolbar that do a variety of things. Here we have basically the canvas or the stage, and right now the stage isn't centered. We have some additional tools here like things to edit a scene, and so we'll talk about the concept of scenes more, basically more and more in phases as we work through the class. You can stitch scenes together just like you can stitch scenes in a movie together. You can edit symbols and control their stacking layer. We'll talk about what a symbol is a little bit more next week, and we can also center the stage. As you can see, I don't have a whole lot of real estate right now because I'm shooting the video. And then we can clip content outside the stage, which is actually the pasteboard, which is this black area that is outside the stage. We have the zoom tool and its various options. Over here we have a variety of floating panels, just like we see in other Adobe software, like the color tab and panel and swatches. Libraries, which we'll talk about in another lecture. We have the option to lock these panels, unlock them. You can float them around just like you float any other panel in Adobe software. You can merge them, like right here we see we're looking at properties tab and the library tab. The library is similar to the same type of library that you see in other Adobe software. And so one of the things that I don't like about Essentials is how it lays out the panels, and so you can customize by taking these things and dragging. So like I can take properties and just drag it and drop it down here or up here, and I kind of like it up here. And so when I expand it, I look at properties and I'll immediately get some information about my project and what it's doing. So we can see right now it's an HTML5 canvas project and 24 frames per second. and the width and height is 800 by 600. And so you can rearrange things to your liking, and to whatever task that you're accomplishing, whether you're doing character animation or something else. Here we have the timeline, and the timeline is frame based, although we do have a representation for time in seconds and frames. And this is one thing I really like about Flash over After Effects, where After Effects shows you the time and the frames, and they're kind of integrated together, and it's a little quirky and clunky. Here we see the number of frames and the time. And so we're running at 24 frames per second, and if we look at the timeline here and we scrub the playhead, we can't scrub because we don't have any content, but if we were to scrub, it would actually you would see that 1 second is at 24 frames. And then we have within the timeline layers, where we store our objects and symbols. And the main type of objects you'll work with are graphic symbols, buttons, and movie clips. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next lecture. And so there are other tools that you can work with here. Some I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on because this is just an intro. You can zoom in and out on your frames, and let's take a look at how Animate works. One thing I did want to mention is if we think about what our finished product will look like, let's take a look at it. We basically want it to look like the typical Hello World program that you do in a lot of classes. So if I play this animation, what we'll see is the globe Earth will float upwards, not rotate. It'll just kind of float from bottom to the top, and Hello World will tween in from the left side of the screen. So if I want to play that again, you'll see that this is what we want to kind of mimic and create in the lab. And so this area that looks like an artboard, similar to artboards you see in Illustrator and Photoshop, is called the stage. And everything outside of the stage will not display in the final animation or movie. And so one of the things we need to do is we need to make this stage black. And so we can do that by going to Modify and setting our document preferences. And so here we can get more information, or it's the similar or same information that we can get on the panels here. And so we can change our document settings here, right? And we're going to leave it at pixels, 800 by 600. We're not going to worry so much about the anchor point or change our frame rates, but we do want to change the stage color to black so that the Earth is looking like it's floating there in space or actually moving, right? And we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we see that we have the black stage. We can see our pasteboard here in the environment, and so we see what we have to work with. And so the first thing we might want to do is to simply bring that graphic into Adobe Animate. Now there are different ways to bring graphics in. For this one, we're just going to drag and we're going to drop it. We're not going to bring it into the library. We'll talk about that. You'll see that in a reading, and I'll talk about it some more next week. So just drag and we're just going to drop it. We'll leave it pretty much the same size that it is. Now we can see here we dropped it, and it's kind of towards the middle, or the kind of offset from the middle here. And if we want, we can do things like go to our Align panel, and we can align this graphic to the stage, or not align it to the stage, align it to other items. If we deselect Align to Stage, we're going to align this to the stage, And right now I kind of want to align it to the right side, and I want to align it to the bottom, just for now. And so if we look at the timeline, something's changed. We can see that this graphic has been added to the timeline in layer 1. And we know it's there because right here we have a symbol with a little dot in it, and that dot means it's a keyframe. So there's a frame now on frame 1. And so Animate has taken or referenced that graphic, and it's placed it on layer 1. And it's a good idea for us to name our layers. So let's just go ahead and name this one Earth. If we take a look at another feature here in Animate, the library, we'll notice that this graphic, earth.png, has been imported into Adobe Animate. And so we can get information on it if we double click. It's earth.ping. It shows us its original location in terms of the directory and how it's handling it. We get information on the size of it. And then ultimately right here, compression, how it will be compressed once we publish the project. So we can start with a PNG or a GIF, but if by default it's set to JPEG, when we publish, that's what it's going to be published to, and it's going to be published, and it's by default it's going to be compressed to some degree, so it'll be about 80% of the quality that we see. Now we can say, well, we want 100%, but that makes for a very large file. But for something this simple, it doesn't really matter. And so we're going to go ahead and cancel. But we can see in the library we can get information. We can name our objects or rename them. But once we bring them to the stage, they're also stored in the library. The nice thing about the library is that we can reuse our objects. So the next thing we need is to basically throw some text in there, but we need another layer to do it. So we'll go over here to the timeline and we'll click Add a New Layer. Okay, and then let's just name this Hello, because this is where we're going to put the text for Hello World. And notice what happened now. The timeline has another layer, but where in this case we have the symbol with a little black meatball in there for the Earth layer, meaning there's a keyframe because we have that first piece, that first object on the stage here. This one, it looks like a keyframe, but the meatball, the little meatball, only has a border. It doesn't have any fill, and so that's very, very tiny and kind of hard to see, but you see it there. So what we need to do is we need to actually put some content on there for the keyframe for it to change, because we've added some content. And so what I want to do is lock Earth, and I'm kind of picky. I lock layers that I'm not working with so I don't make a mistake by having that layer on the same the object on the same layer. You can have more than one object on a layer. And remember, I talked about the types of objects: buttons, graphics, the type of objects or symbols, buttons, graphics, and movie clips. Movie clips are like a flash movie within a flash movie. Sort of like if you're in the if you use After Effects, you can have a composition within a composition. So let's just keep that text on its own line, and its own layer, should I say. And let's go to the Tools panel, and let's select the Text tool, and then we'll click here, and we'll go ahead and let's type some information. Let's type Hello World, and you can just leave it at the default font for now. But if I wanted to edit this text, I'd have to do that from the Tools panel here. And so let's see, let's go back and let's reset Essentials, because I made some changes to it and I want to get it right back where it was. And so when I do that, then what it does is the properties panel opens and it shows that, and I meant to reset it, I'm really sorry about that. It shows that what we have here is static text. There are other types of text, dynamic text, but it's not what you think. We'll talk about that later. And here we see the font type, and style and size and color. And so why don't we go ahead and let's put this, I don't want to make it 22, let's set it to about 72 point. And you see here you can adjust the letter spacing if you want to do that. We can make the style and regular, bold, italic, narrow, etc. Let's make it bold. And I really like that little funky green, so I'm going to have it stand out, kind of that lime green, because it's so annoying, right? And so we can align the text, we can adjust letter spacing, etc. Okay, so we have that all done, and as you can see, it's pretty straightforward to work with. And you can see now one of the things, and one of the reasons why I mess around with essentials and I set my own layout, is the one thing I hate is it basically takes the tools and it sticks them on the right, and I'm used to them being on this side because that's where they were in the old Flash. And so I go back to my select tool and I can see that text there. Now what I want to do is I want to zoom out a little bit. So let's go out to about 500, because then I can see more of the pasteboard. And when we animate something in Adobe Animate, we have a starting point and we have an ending point. And what happens between the starting point and the ending point is a tween. So in this case, we're just going to do a simple classic tween to have Earth appear and then Hello World appear in the stage. So on the stage. And so first thing I want to do is just drag that Hello World text out of the way. And then I also want to drag the Earth. Now I locked that layer, so I'm going to unlock it. When I click on that graphic and hold the Shift key down, I can drag it pretty much straight down. And so what I want to do is to animate these two really quickly over, let's say, 3 seconds. We want to have them both, the Earth slide up and pretty much center on the right side of the stage, and Hello World to come across. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we have to create what's called a keyframe, another keyframe, and then we will tell Animate to tween between both keyframes. And we're going to talk about these tweens a little bit more in the next 2 lectures, so they're very clear. But for now, I just want you to have a video that you can, an Animate movie that you can submit for homework, and you can kind of see how this all works. And so let's start with the world, and what we want to do is let's go to 3 seconds right here. So we're going to click on 3 seconds, and what you're going to do is we're going to press the F6 key, and I got to make sure all my function keys are on, so stand by on my computer so I get that set. Okay, I have one of those smart keyboards that makes you look really stupid. So I'll click on this frame, which is 3 seconds, right? And that's basically frame 72. And if I want to know where I am in Animate, I can pretty much just, you think about the amount of time, but once I add that keyframe, it's going to show me that I'm on frame 72. So if I press F6, it inserts a keyframe. You see that? That was very fast. What happened is that Animate makes an assumption that, okay, what you want to do is you want to insert a keyframe. Now, what I need to do on that keyframe, though, is to actually change the position. So I want to change the position. So I need these two frames to be different. And right now they look exactly the same, right? The Earth isn't moving. So in this frame right here, where I am, I'm actually going to hold down the Shift key and bring the Earth right up almost to the middle here. Okay, just approximately to the middle. And now, when I scroll back, scrub back and forth, this is called scrubbing, you can see that the Earth just jumps, right? But we want a nice smooth transition. So we're going to tell Animate to insert a tween for us. And we're going to tell it to animate using what's called the classic tween. So what we can do is click anywhere between the two frames, and we're going to right click, and we're going to say that we want to create a classic tween. Now, for now, just ignore this, but what it's going to say is, well, I can't tween this thing because I have to convert it to a symbol to do it. And that's fine. Objects need to be symbols to be tweened, and we'll talk about that some more in detail next week. But let's go ahead and click OK, and then we'll see that we have the classic tween. And what you'll notice when we go to the library is that we now have a symbol for Earth versus the graphic. And I talked about those three types of objects. So if I go here to the library and look, so we have Earth PNG, but we have some tweens that are added to reference that object. And this is what happens when we let Animate do the work for us. In the coming weeks, we'll actually convert it to a symbol first. And so we can see that we get a nice interpolation between the frames, and it's animated over. Okay, so what do we need to do next for this text? Well, first thing is we're on frame 1. We need to go to frame 72. Press F6, or on the menu bar you can select Insert Timeline Keyframe. Not blank keyframe, but a keyframe. We'll talk about the differences in the next lecture. So keyframe. And now we have that keyframe, but there's no change in position except for the Earth. And what we want is to have this text here. And so we'll click on that last keyframe, hold the Shift key down, and we'll move the text over ourselves so it's sort of there and overlapping the Earth. And so now, between the two keyframes, this first keyframe and the second keyframe, we have a change, right? And we can go ahead and right click and say create a classic tween. Let's just use a classic tween right now. Don't worry about motion tween. We'll talk about what that is later. We'll do that, and we get the same message. It's going to have to be converted, and we click OK. Now notice that we have these 4 tweens that are in referencing and in reference to the conversion of these objects. And when we scrub the playhead, we can see that they animate nicely. We can get a preview of the animation if we press this play button, and we can see how everything will work, right? And we can rewind, and that's all good. With this tool, we can insert our keyframes, or we can step from one keyframe to the next, and that's very useful. And here we can see a really nice preview of this very simple animation. If we wanted to, we could go ahead and take it and then publish, but let's not worry about that right now. I'm only interested in your Animate movie. Go ahead and select File, and then Save, and then make sure that you save this in the folder that you created, and then use the same naming convention: your first name, your last name, lab1, and part1, and then save your work. Alright, and when you're done, I want you to go ahead and close the file, take the folder that you have, and send it to a compressed zipped folder, and you'll take that zip archive and upload it to Canvas. Please do not submit RAW files. I hope this video helps you and gets you started from this point on, watch the remaining lecture videos that we have in Canvas and complete the reading and follow along in the reading and get oriented to Animate. If you have any questions, post them to the questions forum and I will be there to help you.